as far as I know, the only living witness to the Remagen Railroad Bridge going into the Rhine River.
Yeah, tell me about that.
People of Remagen loved their bridge. They loved it because it was an attraction for visitors from all over the countryside. And they loved to stroll across it on Sunday afternoons, to have picnics near the site of it. And they're right proud of the fact that the bridge was a strategic link between the German Ruhr on the north and the Saar-Moselle region on the south. Everybody knew that it would take a long amount of planning to cross the Rhine River, because this was the big natural barrier between the Siegfried Line and the straight shot toward Berlin. So even before we landed in Normandy, the Supreme Headquarters began to lay its strategic plans.
The bridge enabled us to get across the Rhine here without having to make an assault later on. And really made a decision to cross on a wide front easier for Eisenhower to make.
5 tanks and about 120 infantrymen across the Remagen Bridge, a pretty thin force to hold a strategic point like that. But the next morning, all of the American troops within miles around converged on the bridgehead, and within 24 hours, 8,000 American soldiers had crossed the Remagen Bridge.
It was funny because I was in an outfit called Field Artillery Observation, and we were up on a knoll, actually a hillside, just outside of Remagen, on telephone lines that stretched across it. And I can remember my commanding officer saying, who I don't remember now even what his name was or anything, because that's back 60 years ago.
Yeah, sure.
But I can remember him saying, they told us to string our wire over here, but I don't know why. And at that time I was a corporal, and he says, Corporal, I'm going to tell you like it is. String your wires across that bridge. And he says, if you're like me, you wonder why, go ahead and wonder, but he says, you'll never get the answer.
Yeah.
And
Surprised that it was still up? As I understand, the Germans were blowing up every bridge across there, right?
well, yeah, of course, trouble with me was, you have to remember I was a railroad brat.
Right.
That means my father was a railroader. And I was very partial to railroads.
Right.
And so I said, well, naturally the railroad bridge would stand up anything against anything the Cross would do.
Right.
It was strictly built for a railroad bridge, and then between the rails they laid this. Actually, it was 2x6s, 2x8s, and so forth, and we walked across that. Probably crossed that bridge in a 24-hour period. We probably crossed it 15, 20 times a day.
My unit, the Combat Engineer Battalion, worked hand in hand with a bridge construction outfit that was more or less in charge of erecting the dismembered pieces of iron and steel that were the upper part of the bridge. Ours was mainly the job of the flooring of the bridge. This was a railroad bridge, by the way.
That bridge, like, maybe 15 minutes before it went in the water.
My word.
Remember this officer saying to me, just before I made my last walk across it, he says, Corporal, he says, you got to remember, he says, that bridge could go down at any time. And I said, sir, if it goes down, it'll take me down with it because I can't swim. And he laughed and he says, I don't think even if you could swim, that you could swim the Rhine River.
Yeah.
Just before that, just before the bridge went down, because I can still remember my exact words, because we had what was known as radio silence then, and we were under no circumstances supposed to break that.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you, I sat up there on that hillside looking down, and my exact word was, "Oh my God, the bridge is down." So that I broke radio silence, and quite frankly, at that time, I could have cared less.
Yeah.
No matter what they did to me, if they wanted to take me out and shoot me, I was fine. But I was going to let the world know that the Remagen Bridge was down.
Yeah.
And I can remember having a war correspondent come to the cave afterwards. He was a correspondent for NBC, and I can remember him saying, "Corporal, are you the one that announced that the bridge went down?" And I said, "You're damn right I was. Well, that was my moment of glory, and I wasn't going to give it up for nobody."
Yep.
You know, when you're 19, you do a lot of things that you wouldn't do when you're 78. I lost a good buddy. Went down with it.
You can well imagine that whole big structure disappeared in front of us. And now we're all running to see what we can do about fishing people out of the river.
Real reasons, I think, in addition to this, that contributed to the collapse was the amount of heavy equipment that the engineers moved onto the bridge. Cranes, electric arc welders, air compressors, all these things set up vibrations. The American artillery batteries, and particularly anti-aircraft batteries, that set up vibrations that caused all the ground to shake around the bridge. I don't think that you could say that any single one of these factors caused the collapse of the bridge, but the combination of them caused the structure just to weaken and die on the 17th of March.
I assume you had a chance to see them.
Oh yeah.
How did you feel?
Quite frankly, I think like any other 19-year-old, I hated them.
Right.
Because in my estimation, it was their fault that my life was disrupted.
Every major victory in war is a result of long planning, long preparation, with the loss of often thousands of men. But when something comes along that is unexpected and you have this great prize, now there's a great alarm. In the other cases, you've expected it, you've planned for it, and here you come along with something that gives a great lift to the morale of the whole force, everybody. I think from private up to our bosses in Washington and London knew that the war was over. Every one of us realized that if Hitler had the slightest sense, he would immediately surrender. But it was the gallantry of the men that did it is something that should never be forgotten. And their names really ought to be in some, I'd say, permanent place.